I'm an alcoholic in recovery, 16 plus years sober. And when I told a friend that I was going to give a talk about alcoholic depression and suicide, he said, "Wow, how do you get to do that?" "Easy," I said. "First, you survive a suicide attempt in your own bed one sunny September morning in 2006, and then you get sober." So I'm a writer and a storyteller. I love telling true stories in high heels. It's a quirk of mine. And the way I understand the world is through other people's stories and telling my own. So before I reached that point, that sunny September morning in 2006, I had real life suicidal alcoholic mentors. There was Genevieve, a friend of my mother's in my early childhood growing up in small town Texas. I loved visiting Genevieve with my mom. She was rich and lived in a fancy two-story house with her teenage kids and her husband. I remember the gentle clink of melting ice, like sleigh bells, and the crystal tumbler of gin on the rocks that was always attached to her hand. She looked like Betty Ford, who was then First Lady and later became First Lady of Recovering Alcoholics. When the visit stopped, I asked Mom, "Why don't we see Genevieve?" Her mascara started to run, and she said, "Because she died. Suicide. I can't imagine why she did that. She was a severe alcoholic." That was the first time I heard the words alcoholic and suicide. I was 5. Then in my late 20s, there was Paul. He was a talented alcoholic writer with whom I worked when I was in publishing. I adored Paul. We would have long, boozy lunches where we would discuss our shared love of old Hollywood. And then he disappeared for a while. And when he resurfaced, he said that he had become so depressed that he attempted suicide. He said that he felt like he was all used up. Done was the word he used. Done. And I felt the way my mom felt about Genevieve. I just couldn't imagine how anyone as beloved and talented as Paul could sink to that point. A few months later, he died by suicide. So, what was going on with me when that sunny September morning in 2006 rolled around? At that point, I had been an everyday drinker for years, had recently become a round the clock drinker. I had been fired from one job and was close to losing the new job I was in. Suicide was the last thought when I passed out at night and the first when I came to in the morning. So, what were some of the tangible reasons I was suicidal? Humiliation over the loss of that job and the perception that my career in publishing was done. The unshakable feeling that I would never achieve my artistic aspirations to write and perform, dreams I drank away a decade earlier. Oh, here's a biggie: a gigantic pair of Art Deco chairs that were too big for my living room. What an expensive mistake. You see, I had sunk into a Grand Canyon of depression that placed all my problems on the same shelf, gave them equal weight, from the loss of a job to a lousy decorating choice. So on that morning, I overslept after a couple of vodka screwdrivers, and I emailed my boss a recycled excuse. She shot back, "Again?" And then I just freaked out. I looked into the mirror and I stared hard at the bloated, splotchy ghost. "I'm done," I said nose to nose with my reflection in the mirror. Done. I finally understood how Genevieve and Paul felt, how they had reached that point. I poured another vodka on the rocks and took the plunge. My husband found me. More importantly, I was found out as what I call an SAS, suicide attempt survivor. I thought about the term attempted suicide survivor, but that acronym is ASS. So the focus quickly shifted from my suicide attempt to treating my alcoholism or alcohol use disorder. I use the terms interchangeably. And rightfully so. I went away to rehab. I started going to 12-step sober meetings and seeing a therapist. I still go to those meetings and see the same therapist. And once the alcohol was out of my system and my alcoholism was being treated, the severe depression lifted. I'm not clinically depressed, but alcohol is a depressant. Most people don't realize that, just like I didn't realize that. And I came to know that it was the alcohol that brought on the severe depression, suicidal ideation, made all my problems seem insurmountable, from dashed dreams to a gigantic pair of Art Deco chairs. My struggle to get sober was rough. It took 2 years and relapses before I finally got a year sober and started to slowly rebuild my life and realize my dreams to write and perform. Good for me! And all those other recovering alcoholics and addicts out there, right? It's good for you too. Because what I'm sharing can be life saving for anyone who drinks or uses drugs, has suicidal thoughts, cares about someone who does, cares about suicide prevention, is a survivor of suicide loss, or an SAS like me. I think that touches just about everyone watching this talk. When celebrities like Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade, both of whom were known to be heavy drinkers, die by suicide, it opens up the public conversation. The first questions tend to be, why would they when they had so much in life? The same questions that my mom asked about Genevieve and I asked about Paul. And then the conversation shifts to severe depression, the clinical kind. Missing from that equation is depression brought on by alcohol and substances. I continue to be shocked by the near total silence around the symbiosis of alcohol use disorder, depression, and suicidal depression, despite the statistics. The National Library of Medicine reports that heavy drinkers have a five-fold chance of suicide over social drinkers, and that mood and substance disorders, particularly alcoholism, figure more prominently in suicide than any other disorder. And according to the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, 30% of those who die by suicide have blood alcohol levels in the range of intoxication at the times of their death. And at the beginning of 2025, the U.S. Surgeon General called for alcoholic beverages to carry warning labels the way cigarette packs do, that alcohol causes multiple forms of cancer. Missing from that label, alcohol can cause depression, suicidal depression, and suicide. My lived experience and witnessing the lived experiences of countless others in recovery over the past 16 plus years has taught me firsthand just how many wanted to die, considered suicide, tried it like me, and died by suicide. It's time to broaden and enrich our definition of depression to include depression brought on by alcohol and substances. When we talk about suicidal depression, when we talk about depression, period, it's imperative that we talk about alcoholism and addiction. And ever since I became a writer and a storyteller, I have been talking about it. I've shared my story in the New York Times and at conferences, in a memoir and a solo show in the hopes to raise awareness and maybe save a few lives. What can we all do? Well, if you're looking for signs that someone may be suicidal, excessive drinking and drugging is a sign larger than that old Canadian Club whiskey billboard in the middle of Times Square. If you're feeling hopelessly depressed and drinking or using drugs, consider that substances may be the cause and seek help. Never underestimate the role of alcohol and suicide. I'll say it again. Alcohol is a depressant. And even those who aren't alcoholics or addicts, but are at risk because they're clinically depressed and self medicating, we can't stop talking about how alcohol and drugs can fuel and, in some cases, empower a suicide attempt. If you feel like someone close to you is suicidal, don't be afraid to ask the question. Are you thinking about suicide? Do you have a plan? They may not tell you the truth, or they just might open up. And if the answer is yes, tell them, wait until tomorrow, which is the advice that alcoholics and addicts in recovery give to each other when the craving to use becomes overwhelming. Usually by the next day, the urge has lifted. I gave this same advice to a friend in crisis recently who wanted to kill himself. He's still alive. And if you have suicidal thoughts, acknowledge them. I still do. And I realize that's okay. I also know that just because I'm sober, well, sane, it doesn't cure suicidal thinking, but it helps cure suicidal action. My suicide prevention plan is staying sober, but I don't want to leave anything to chance. So I finally got rid of those giant Art Deco chairs. They were taking up way too much space. Thank you.